Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we are doing a review on the Fishman Island Arc. And before we get into it, if you've been wondering where I've been for the past however many months it's been since I've been making videos, I did make another video explaining where I've been, so if you don't care you can just keep going and we can just do this review. But if you do care, you're wondering where I've been for the past however many months and all the crazy stuff that's gone wrong in my life in that time, look at my last video, that explains it all. My only new thing to add to that is I've now left my bar manager job and I am now van lifing. So that's pretty exciting. It's great news for me because now I'm in a stress-free environment and it means I'm going to be making a lot more videos. So as of now, it is official. I now have the time and I now have the stress-free life that I can go back to making weekly videos. So I'm pretty excited to be back in the seat. But with all that out of the way, let's move on to the Fishman Island Arc. So I'm up to the part where they've just left the Shabodi archipelago, and they are just about to go under the ocean in their ship that had been covered with the bubbles. Now, I just thought I'd take a moment here to kind of talk about everything that's happened. We've, come in contact with all of the Straw Hat crew again. We've seen all of their powers. We've seen everything escalate. We've seen all of these characters return. And I thought that so much happened in the first couple of chapters that I wanted to talk about it right now before I've read the rest of it, because I know that I'm probably going to forget all of the important points that have happened in these first few chapters. So just off the top of my head, the very first thing that I wanted to talk about was how much I admire the creative choice to not bring up the Hakis until so far into the series, right? So we've known about the Hakis for so long because Luffy and his crew have come across a lot of people that are using them. So I just wanted to take this moment to really get across how much I admire Oda's restraint, because we didn't find out about all this information about the Haki, like all this stuff, all this training that Luffy has got on it now, until 650 chapters in. Now, as the author, as the creator of this entire thing, you would be wanting people to know. You'd be like, I've got this awesome magic system, I've got this big plan, and I can't wait for people to come across it, I can't wait for people to understand it, give me their feedback, tell me how brilliant I am, all this kind of stuff. But he managed to play the long game and really draw it out in the most interesting way possible, especially because we knew that Luffy was going to be strong in the Haki, right? Because he has the Will of the D, he is the main character, it's one of the main magic sources, so we knew that Luffy was going to be strong in it. And it was so great of Oda to avoid that classic pitfall of, the young adult novels where the teenage girl is taken to a castle because she's secretly the princess, and then after 2 days of training with a sword, she is suddenly the greatest swordsman in the entire land because it's just in her blood and she knows it, right? So it was really great of Oda to draw that out for so long and to have that patience and to have that foresight, and then to really make Luffy earn it over that 2-year span. It just really made it feel earned, and it made it feel real, and it made it help to flesh out the world, because if Luffy, our main character, our protagonist, took 2 years to learn how to use the Haki, then all these other people that can use it must have also been dedicating their lives to their swordsmanship or their whatever it is that they're doing with their Haki. And it really helps to flesh out the world to be like, these people are people that have really been doing this for a long time. Moving on from the Haki and moving more into the general story and everything that happened, we get everyone, they've all come back to the island, they're all trying to meet back at the boat so they can obviously do their reunion and move on to Fishman Island. Now, on the island, we come across the fake Straw Hat crew. Now, to me, I felt like this might have been somewhat of a missed opportunity with the fake Straw Hat crew. I thought that they were going to be something more along the lines of the Ember Island players from Avatar: The Last Airbender. If you haven't seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, go and watch it. It is one of the greatest stories ever told. But if you don't know who the Ember Island players are, they are an act or a group of actors that comedically recap everything that happened so far up until that moment in Avatar The Last Airbender, and it's done pretty quickly. It's done in an episode. It's like a recap episode. You know, most sitcoms have it, like Friends and The Big Bang Theory. They all have those flashback episodes. It was one of those things to like catch everybody up to that moment and be like, wow, look how far we've come, and now we are going on to this next step. I thought that this fake Straw Hat crew was going to be like that flashback episode. It was like, guys, you know, it's been 2 years since Straw Hat and, you know, the crew did all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I thought it was going to be one of those moments where, like, the fake Luffy is like, do you know who I am? I'm Straw Hat Luffy. I'm the one that did this with Crocodile, and I did this with this, and, buddy, I did that with that. And I thought it was going to be one of those moments to catch up the readers. But instead it came across more as like a mild antagonist and mild comedic relief to kind of get the reader back into it. Because if I recall, I believe people were telling me that there was a time break here for the readers or for the writers of One Piece when the Straw Hat crew took a break. I believe the writers of One Piece also took a break. So I thought it would make a lot of sense to have that like flashback episode now and be like, hey, look how far we've come. And now look at everything that we're going to do. So I don't want to dwell too much longer on this part because I'm sure that the Fishman Island part is going to take up a lot of time and I've already talked too much about this. But I just wanted to bring up this moment in the story, right? So, you know, this whole part on the Bodhi archipelago, it was a great little reunion. You know, there was some lighthearted moments, there were some dark moments. But I thought this moment in particular was really important to talk about because of how easily they have been managed to destroy these guys, right? So back 2 years ago, before they went and they did all their training to become the best versions of themselves they could be, this guy absolutely destroyed them, right? There was one of them, and he was like insurmountable. He was just the biggest thing that any of them could ever do, and they couldn't beat him, right? It was just insurmountable. This guy was just way too powerful. But then in this scene, Luffy just in one shot, boom, destroys him. And then in the next scene, there's like a moment where Zoro and Sanji also just one-shot him, right? And for someone like me, so if you've watched a lot of my past reviews, I've said a lot of things like, you know, I don't really understand, or like it's going to be really interesting to see how they power up Luffy, because he isn't even on the other side of the Grand Line yet, but he is just coming up against these people that just seem incredibly powerful. They're just like unbeatable, unstoppable. You know, one guy was made out of light. You know, the other guy, we don't even know what his power is yet, but he turned into a giant golden something, you know. And it just didn't really make sense, or like in my mind I couldn't really fathom, like, how is Luffy going to beat these people, right? These are the people that are on this side of the red line. You know, it only gets so much more intense when he gets onto the other side of the red line. So how is he, what happens? How does he get to that point where he's that strong? And now, you know, it's great to come across these moments where, one, it's earned because they did 2 years of solid training, and two, it really shows that power growth because this person that you saw them struggle and just really, you know, struggle to beat and in the end lost to, now they can just run up, boom, one shot, like it's nothing, keep going. So it's going to be really exciting to see what happens next, and that's it for now. I'll see you in a minute when I get done with the Fishman Island. Hi, hello, welcome back to the channel. As you can see, things are looking a little different. I have officially started van lifing now, which is pretty darn exciting, but it's also pretty good for the channel because it means now that I'm officially van lifing, I can go back to doing weekly videos because I don't have all the ridiculousness of my work life and all that craziness going on. So I'm now living a pretty darn chill life, and I should be able to do my weekly videos again. Now, I did originally want to film this video here, because it seemed very One Piecey, it seemed very beachy. If you're wondering where that is, it's a place in Australia called Tweed Heads, and I wanted to film the video there because it was beautiful, beachy, it seemed very One Piece themed because it was on the ocean. But There were some issues with lighting, the sun was just incredible and was just washing everything out on my camera, and the wind was crazy. So instead, I'm now back in my van, and we are going to be doing this here. But enough about all that, let's talk about One Piece. Let's talk about everything that happened. First of all, I feel as if that we have to start with the princess, right? We have to start with the big reveal in this arc, being that the princess is the super weapon Neptune, right? Which is huge, for a few reasons, but if I have the panel, I'm going to put it up here. It was really interesting when the Sea Kings were explaining to the princess how it all worked and, this, that, the other. But there was this one specific part where the Sea Kings say that our true king, once every 100 years, I think it was, once every 100 years, our true king is born as a mer person. And if I have the panel, I'll throw it up here. And I thought that was really interesting because it made me think, does that mean that the princess is actually a Sea King? Or is there one true king, a different species for them? Because there was also, let's just talk about world building for a second. There was also so much world building in this, especially when it came to the differences between, the fishmen and the, mermaid people as well. And how, when they breed, it can be, it's really ridiculously hard to predict what kind of a fish person your baby is going to be, because you could have, hereditary genes from 100 grandparents ago, and you could both be octopuses, but you're going to give birth to a great white shark because 100 years ago there was a shark in your family. And just on the topic of world building, it was really interesting that Oda put so much time and effort. I mean, it's very much who he is, and it should be predictable by this point, but it was really interesting how much time and effort he put into world building that environment, such as the water roads that would travel through the sky, the pieces of coral that could produce bubbles, or the mermaid people, because they don't have legs, they travel around on those floating bubbles. And then, of course, there was the whole class divide, everything that came with that. There was the whole how they reproduce and, how random that reproduction can be. It was really interesting, and it was really great to see him put so much effort and time into world building something that he didn't have to world build as much as he did, but it was really nice to see it happen. But anyway, let's talk about the ramifications of finding out that the princess is the secret weapon Neptune. So now we know that the other two, I believe it was Pluton and Uranus were the other two. Now we know that those two are also people. It makes me wonder, is one of them Blackbeard? Right, straight off the bat, if I had to make the prediction, I'd be like, okay, surely one of them is going to be Blackbeard. That's why he's so prolific. That's why he's able to take, more people's devil fruit abilities. That's why people are naturally drawn to him. Or it could be the will of the D, who knows. But if I was to place a bet right now, if someone said, you must predict who the other two super weapons are, I would presume that Blackbeard would be one of them. That's why he's being set up to be such a huge antagonist or, villain to the story. I did, however, think that was a really interesting choice to make these super weapons people, right? Because I've been around storytelling for a long time. If you don't know, I'm also an author. I read a lot of books. I blah, 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 blah. So I've been around storytelling for a long time. And, it seems like this might be one of those things that people would take not so well. I feel as if people would have some serious criticisms about finding out that these super weapons were people. Personally, I don't mind. One Piece has got so much craziness going on, and there's always so much left, right, whatever, and I trust Oda, right? I think Oda is one of the greatest storytellers that I've read, right? So I'm thinking, I trust him. Oda, you're taking me on this journey, you take me on this journey, right? But I would love to know, when you found out about people being the super weapons, did it rub you the wrong way, or were you like, yep, sure, cool, I'm on board, let's do it? Because this seems like, in regular storytelling, something that would rub people the wrong way. Alright, next, let's talk about Hordy, right? Because I've praised One Piece a lot, right? I generally have very high opinions of One Piece, but one of the things that I really enjoy about One Piece is how great the villains are, how well written the villains are, how well rounded they are, and this, that, the other. Watch any of my other videos, I'm always talking about how much I love the villains, and how a story is only as good as its villains, and blah blah blah. To me, I think Hordy was a little bit short of the mark compared to the other villains in One Piece so far, right? Because, his whole thing about, just having that hatred for the humans, and how he inherited that hatred, and how, if I have the panel, I'm pretty sure I saved it. This one was really interesting. It shows when Hordy was a kid, and there's the Octopus Man, and he is talking about how great the humans are. Oh, it might have been Jinbe, actually. It was one of those two. They were talking about how great the humans are, and then young Hordy turns away and says, I don't want to hear these stories anymore. And then he goes and he seeks out Arlong instead, and he goes and listens to Arlong talking about, the humans are this, the humans are that. And it was a really interesting moment, because it shows, especially when you're young, you choose to have that hatred in your heart. You choose what fuels you. And, I hate to compare things to Avatar: The Last Airbender all the time, but Avatar was also a great, a well-written, one of the best pieces of storytelling ever. So it's hard not to compare a great story with a great story. And in that moment, it felt a lot like, Zuko with Uncle Iroh, and Zuko with, the traditional Fire Nation and his dad and all that kind of stuff. He chose to be fueled by hate. He was given the opportunity to hear about how great the humans were and to have, blah, blah, blah. But instead, he chose to hate them. And then moving on from there, we find out about, he was the one that shot the queen. He framed a human pirate for it. He got the pirate to burn the signatures and all that kind of stuff. None of that to me was particularly surprising. I feel as if that was something that was pretty easy to be seen. One of the big parts, however, I thought was when we found out that his entire motivation was just inherited hate, right? And it was a big thing about how the queen was don't hold a grudge, if you find out who killed me, don't tell anyone, just keep it to yourself, don't hate them yourself, just kind of forgive, or even don't forgive, just kind of keep it to yourself, right? It was one of those inherited hate things, and it was what the queen in her dying breath was don't inherit the hate, don't pass it on to the kids, don't pass that hate on. And it was just interesting that Hordy was that embodiment of everything that the queen stood against. Even in her last dying wish, she was let's not make any more Hordys, right? They killed me, let's just... Bringing that hate out into the world will only make more of him. And it was especially interesting when we find out when the princes are fighting with Hordy, and he's what did the humans do to you? What happened? What did the humans do? And for so long, we'd found out that the humans had, for, say, what was his name? Fisher Tiger. He hated humans, and he was going around and freeing slaves, and we find out that he doesn't want the blood from the humans because he can't forgive them, and he doesn't want to be saved by them because they killed him as a slave for X amount of years, and they treated him terribly, and he's just I can't, just let me die instead. And and we find out that generally the people that held this hatred for the humans were the people that once were their slaves, right, which is justifiable. But then we find out that Hordy was never a slave, right? When the prince is there and he's what did they do to you? And he says nothing, right? It's just shows that inherited hatred, and it recontextualizes everything that princess, the queen said with her dying breath, don't pass this hate onto the kids, don't let them inherit it. Which now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm just that was actually really clever, well done. That is... I knew that this was going to be a great story, but it just is taking me saying it out loud right now to be wow, that was really clever. But more from that, I want to talk about hatred as motivation, right? So hatred as motivation is a really, really interesting thing. And at the end of this story, Hordy kind of burns out because he took all those pills, right? So he kind of burns out, he goes old, he's all decrepit and whatever. And to me, that was a really interesting thing, right? Because I don't know how old you are watching this, right? But when you're younger, it is really, really easy to be fueled by hatred, right? I know I was below the poverty line when I was growing up, and I had all these rich people around me, and I had this, that, and the other. I won't get too much into it, but I was a young man that was fueled by hatred myself when I was a kid. and I did really great things, right? Like I didn't, try and destroy the world or anything, but it was a great motivation to me to try and better myself and, bring myself out of poverty and blah, 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 blah. And so I was fueled by hatred for a long time. And then eventually I got to the point where I was happy. I was happy with my life. I brought myself out of poverty. I'd done this, I'd done that, I joined the army, I'd done this, I'd done all this cool shit, and I was like, you know what, I'm living a pretty good life now, I'm pretty happy with myself. And when you find that peace, suddenly you just enter this like weird spiral of like, oh, I was fueled by hatred for so long, but now that I feel happiness, what do? I don't have that fuel anymore, I don't have that drive, I don't have that desire, what do I do? And I think another great version of that in storytelling is, again, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Spoilers, if you haven't seen Avatar, skip 30 seconds or whatever. If you haven't seen Avatar, go and watch it. It is fantastic. But spoilers right now for the next 30 seconds. We see this again when Zuko joins the Avatar, and he's no longer fueled by hate, and he's kind of at peace and whatever, and so he runs out of the ability to bend fire, right? Because for Zuko and for a lot of firebenders, including his father, their ability to bend fire comes from hate, right? It comes from aggression and hate and violence and whatever. But then he has to, after he's more at peace because of everything Uncle Iroh taught him, he has to then find a new fuel for that fire inside of him. Right, and that's something I really connect with, because that's something that I had to go through as well. And another big one is like, if you go to the gym and you're there and you're like, oh yeah, I'm working out because I want to look good for like girls or guys or whatever, and then you get a partner, and then suddenly you're like, oh, my motivation to work out is gone because now I've hit my goal, so I'm just kind of like, whatever, I've got a partner. Anyway, the point I'm trying to get at here is when a villain or a hero or an antagonist or whatever is using hate for motivation, it never lasts for very long, right? And I think that was really interesting that they used Hordy as the example, because they made him really old and kind of decrepit at the end, because as a great writer that Oda is, he knows that you can't have a character fueled by hatred forever, because there comes a point where that hatred kind of dies, and then they're just a boat floating in the ocean. There's just no propulsion, there's no nothing. You are just existing until you find a different form of motivation. And I thought that Oda got around that very well. Hello, Editing Josh here. One of the things that I wanted to bring up that I forgot to bring up in this video, and I'm only realizing it now as I'm editing this video, is I meant to bring up the energy steroid pill that Hordy and his crew have been taking. And I wanted to ask what you thought about the pills, because I remember there was a famous study done not too long ago, and it was something about like Olympian hopefuls, and it was like, if you could take some kind of a pill that guaranteed in the next Olympics you won a gold medal, but it meant that you would die after 5 years, would you take that pill? Would you guarantee yourself a gold medal, but you only have 5 more years to live? And it was something crazy, like 80% of Olympian hopefuls all said that they would take that pill. And just knowing something like that, it makes me feel as if even if Hordy and his crew knew that these steroid pills would age them as much as they did, I still feel as if they would have probably still taken them. Because when you are so fanatical about something, you will give up everything to get it. And it felt so much as if that was what Hordy was trying to do. Like, he was trying to destroy Fishman Island at one point, and it felt like he would have done anything to do it, including lose his own life. So I guess one of the big things that I wanted to ask was, is there anything in the world that would make you take that pill? You could have XYZ, you could have any one thing in the entire world, but it meant you only had 5 more years to live. Would you take that pill? Is there anything in the world that would make you take that pill? Alright, let's talk about Vanderdecken as an antagonist in this story. Look, the guy was weird. He was a weird guy, he was a weird dude, he was obsessed with a little mermaid girl. I get it, it was part of his, like, family legacy and whatever, and he wanted to be in control of the super weapon, because as far as I was aware, he was aware that the princess was Neptune, the super weapon. So I get it, he wanted to be, blah blah blah, and he wanted to marry her and get the power for himself and all that kind of stuff. In terms of an antagonist, I think he did a good job. I think you weren't meant to like him as the reader, and like he was meant to be a little bit creepy and a little bit unsettling, and I think that they hit the mark with that pretty well. I think that he was written exactly as he was written. I don't think there was any kind of missing the mark with the character. I did think it was weird that he was murdered at the end. I mean, I get it, right? They needed to kill him to stop the Arc from chasing the princess, and then it falls down. But there's a really weird scene, and I'm pretty sure I saved the panel, so I'll put it here if I saved it. But there's a really weird scene where it's the first picture of Hordy and his crew and all of them inside of the jail cell, and Vanderdecken is there as well, and I'm just like, isn't he dead? Did they just, lock a dead guy in a cell with a whole bunch of people? Isn't that kind of, messed up? But anyway, moving on to Jinbe, I really liked Jinbe when we first met him, and, but there was this weird thing where I was like, is he a bad guy? Is he a good guy? I mean, I get it, he's a grey guy, which is how a lot of these people are meant to be. I'm glad that we got more of Jinbe's backstory, and it did make me like him more, even though, technically he was responsible for the whole Arlong thing, and if my memory serves, he pulled Arlong out of jail, or he got Arlong out of jail as part of his becoming one of the royal Shikibaki things. So he was technically responsible for that Arlong thing, and he apologized to Nami, but I mean, you can't hold Jinbe accountable for that. But yeah, I'm glad that we got a lot more information about him, and I like him a hell of a lot more. It was interesting to see him do his Fishman karate stuff. It was interesting to find out at the end about him and his commitment to Big Mama. In my translation that I'm reading, Big Mama was written in 3 different ways. She was written Big Mam, like Big M-A-M, Big Mom, as in the American spelling for mom, and Big Mama. So I'm going to just presume that her name is Big Mama. But it was interesting to find out his connection to her, and, how all that happened, and how he was kind of responsible for getting their protection for Fishman Island. Which, of course, brings us onto Luffy and the whole Big Mama fiasco with how he ate all the sweets. And Big Mama's crew came at the end and was like, where's our sweets? And Luffy calls her up on the Dandamushi and is like, I ate all your sweets, all 10 ton of them, blah, blah, blah. And the woman's like, look, I know you didn't eat all the sweets. I get that you're trying to protect your friends on Fishman Island. That's fine. Just so you're aware, we are now enemies. I'm going to be looking for you in the new world. And Luffy's like, bring it. I'm going to be king of the pirates. Let's go. And they mentioned something called Whole Cake Island. So I imagine that we will be going to an island shaped like a cake called Whole Cake Island. Just talking about the characters a little bit more and, what we can expect moving forward. I think one of the really interesting things was seeing how strong everyone became, right? So obviously they went away for 2 years, and they went away specifically to get stronger so they can fight in the new world. It was really interesting to see how that strength manifested in the people, when you see Nami using her, what is it? I believe it's called the Climate Act, and she's doing all of the stuff that she's doing. And you see Usopp with all of the clever way he's using his plants and his traps and whatever. You see Sanji can now do can now do the thing where he can jump through the air, like the people that he fought on Skypiea, I believe it was, could do. And he can also ignite things on fire with his kicks. And you see, Zoro is just cool and being Zoro, just like he always has been. And Luffy can do all the things he can do, and he can just do his haki stuff at will, which is really great to see. But one of the really interesting things that I wanted to point out was that even with all the stamina pills or whatever that Hordy was taking, he was still being beat up by Luffy, right? So this guy was just shoveling these, gives you the strength of 1,000 men each pill, and he was taking 100 of these, right? So he had the strength of 100,000 men, and Luffy still beat him up, right? So the interesting thing about that is, now that we have an understanding of how much these people have grown in power, Luffy and his crew still need to struggle in the next coming arcs, right? Because that's just good storytelling. So it just makes me think, like, how strong, what are these situations that these people are going to be put in to make us as the reader think, oh shit, these people are actually really struggling. I'm really looking forward to finding out where Oda goes with all this. I'm really looking forward to finding out how he makes such strong people struggle. Because the thing is, like, they don't have to struggle with people that are physically stronger than them. They can struggle by being put in, like, emotionally difficult situations, or, like, ethically difficult situations. Or, you know, maybe there'll be a crew member that can die if they don't blah blah blah, but, you know, the whole town will die if they don't do this instead. And it's like, do we save our crew member, or do we save 100,000 people in this town? You know, and I'm just really looking forward to how Oda makes these strong people struggle in the future. Before we move on and I start reading the next arc, there are only two more things I want to talk about. I'm glad that we saw Smoker, right? So it was right at the end, it was like the last chapter or something, and I was like, I can't believe we've got all this information and we didn't see Captain Smoker, or whatever rank he was. We didn't see Smoker. But then, boom, we see him right at the end, and we see, you know, his assistant, or whatever it was she was, and she's now a captain. She got a promotion. She's now got, like, skills because they're shooting cannonballs at her, and she's just, like, deflecting it with her sword. And I'm not quite entirely sure why I like Smoker and that woman so much, but there's just something so endearing about them, and I just want the best for them, even though technically I guess we shouldn't like them because they're part of the Marines. But they feel like their own thing, and I feel like eventually by the end, Smoker and that girl are going to be friends with Luffy, and they're going to help him take down some other, probably Blackbeard, right? After Blackbeard gets the super weapons, maybe? Or One Piece. Maybe One Piece is something, who knows, whatever. But I feel like Smoker and the samurai girl are going to be friends with Luffy and the crew at the end, or, you know, they're going to save him, or there's going to be something. So I like to see them grow, and I like to see them, you know, become better and stronger, and, you know, I'm sure that at some point Zoro is going to fight with the samurai girl as well. So it's just really interesting to see what's going on with them. But there's also the big news that Aokiji is no longer part of the Marines, right? So Aokiji and the guy that killed Shanks, R.I.P. Shanks, not Shanks, Ace, the guy that killed Ace, they had a fight to see who would become the next head of the Marines. And it was interesting because it was like, the way it was described was something like Aokiji's really, like, chill, he doesn't, you know, care too much about anything, he doesn't care about the politics, he's just there, he's trying to do a good job, he's just living his best life. But when he found out that this other guy was going for the head of the Marines, he was like, no, absolutely not, this cannot happen. So he goes and he has like a 10-day battle royale with him, which he eventually loses, and then he leaves the Marines entirely. So that's interesting because the guy that killed Ace is now head of the Marines, which gives Luffy a lot of, like, fuel and ammo, like, to go after the Marines. I mean, we haven't seen that yet, but I presume that Luffy will go after the Marines because of the guy that's now in charge of them. And Aokiji also does not like the guy that's in charge of the Marines so much that he would do a 10-day battle royale with him. So maybe Aokiji will be teaming up with Luffy in the future. Who knows? Oh yeah, and we found out about some guy named Joy Boy. I feel as if I should mention that because that'll probably be something big in the future. But right now, all we know is that Joy Boy was a guy, I presume it's a guy, that was alive during the forgotten history of the world, and he wrote an apology to an earlier version of Neptune, and somehow the Arc is tied to it, and the Arc is meant to be pulled by the Sea Kings. What I'm presuming is that when all of the fishermen get off of Fishman Island and go up to the surface, it'll be pulled by the Arc, and that was kind of the prophecy, and maybe Joy Boy was trying to smooth things over with the humans before, but he couldn't do it, and that's what he was apologizing for. He was like, look, I gave my whole life trying to do this. The humans were like, no, we don't want it. So someone in the future will hopefully smooth things over for us. So yeah, that's it. I'll see you next week. I'm now van lifing. Maybe I'll do a van life channel. Who knows? Cool. But yeah, see you next week. And as always, thank you very much.